I'm Julia and I've just got back from walking the Camino Frances. I thought I'd put this video together to show you what kit I took with me and let you know what I thought was valuable and what wasn't. I walked between June and July, and the temperatures differed from 3 degrees some mornings when we set off to 36 or 37 degrees, so quite a wide variety of temperatures in which we slept and walked. Starting with clothes, of course, there was the obligatory sun hat. I wore one bra and took a spare with me, so 2 bras. I decided that I would wear leggings when I was walking because they weigh less than walking trousers. I took 1 short pair and 2 long pairs. 2 pairs of knickers, performance knickers, which means that they're lightweight and they dry really quickly and easily. I was a little bit concerned about socks because last year I had to stop a walk in heat because I got really awful blisters underneath my feet and I just couldn't continue. I knew that I was going to be walking in significant heat again, so I was really concerned that I might have the same problem. One of my friends is an ultra runner and he said, whatever you do, make sure you wear socks with loops on the bottom. So I bought this pair of darn tough socks with loopy bottoms and I wore them in conjunction with ultra Lone Peak trainers, trail shoes, and you can see that after 550 miles the tread is in fairly decent condition, although there are some smooth bits where, particularly on the heels, where I land when I'm walking. That combination of socks and shoes worked really well for me. I didn't have any blisters or any sore points on my feet the whole time. I took one spare pair of the same socks with me, and just in case I needed them, I took inner socks as well. I didn't ever wear them as inner socks, but I did wear them sometimes in the evenings underneath my sandals. Very stylish, but it did just add that extra layer of warmth, so I was happy to carry those. When I set off, we were walking in an absolute heat wave, and my friend who I was joining on the walk told me that she recommended that I take a light, loose shirt rather than a long sleeve shirt that was tight like my merino shirts that I've got already. So I went to a Rohan shop and bought this shirt on the way to the airport, and this was absolutely brilliant. I could layer it up when it was cool, and when it was hot I would wear it with the long sleeves down to protect my arms, and it was also as cool as you could expect in those conditions. It dries really quickly too. On top of that, I had an ISO cool long sleeved top with me, and then in the evenings I generally wore a short sleeved merino top. All of my clothes were well worn, so I'm happy with what my choices were. On a British footpath I wouldn't wear leggings probably because we have a lot more stinging nettles and what have you, but on the Camino the paths are generally pretty wide and pretty clear of those sorts of things that might catch you out. The other item of clothing that I took, and I did debate with myself about this for quite some time, was a silk scarf. This is quite a large silk scarf. I wondered whether to take this or a buff with me. This is really lightweight and it has multiple uses, so this is what I plumped for in the end. I wore it around my neck to keep me warm. I used it as a bag one evening to carry stuff around the town with me in, and you can also use it as a bandage or support if you need to, which I luckily didn't have to do. All of my clothes I kept in a dry bag. This is probably not the lightest dry bag you could possibly have, but this is what I had in my cupboard already, so that's what I used. In terms of waterproofs, I looked at the weather forecasts and found that we were unlikely to have rain across most of the journey, but as we walked through Galicia it was likely that we were going to get rained on at least once, and in fact that's exactly what happened. We were rained on once just for a couple of hours. I had a lightweight waterproof jacket with me, also from Rohan. This jacket has been brilliant. It is waterproof, or it has been for me, and it is lightweight. I wore this as well when it was cold. When it was only 3 degrees, I layered this up on top of my other clothes, and it did its job and kept me warm as well as dry. And the other thing that I took, just in case it rained, because my shoes weren't waterproof, is a pair of waterproof socks. I didn't actually need to wear these, but I would still pack them again if I was doing the same trip. In terms of footwear, I've already showed you the shoes that I wore for most of the walking. For the evenings, I chose to take a pair of Zero sandals with me. They are barefoot sandals, they weigh very little, and they were comfortable to walk around in the evenings. As I say, sometimes when it was a bit cooler, I put socks on underneath them. Not a great look, but very practical. Moving on from clothing, I wasn't sure about what I needed to sleep in on the Camino. What happened most of the time we were in hostels is that people would just sleep in their underwear. It was far too hot most of the time to sleep in anything else, so there's no need to take pyjamas or what have you with you. People don't tend to walk around the hostels in their underwear, they just get changed out of their clothes and slip straight into their sleeping bag. I chose to take a sheet sleeping bag, a silk sheet sleeping bag with me. This is only 110 grams, and that's why I chose this one in particular. But it does have a slight disadvantage in that it's white. I didn't have a choice of colour, and because it's so lightweight, it's quite see-through. So if you want to have a little bit more privacy when you're sleeping, I recommend a darker silk sleeping bag liner. As well as that, some of the hostels don't have blankets, and some nights it was really quite cold in the hostels. I was really pleased with my Thermarest Juno blanket that I bought just before I went away. It has its own pocket built into it that you can stuff it into. It's lightweight, I found it warm, it saved the day for me on a number of occasions. Not least of all when we stopped for tea breaks and breakfast when it was still quite cool in the morning, because I could wrap it around my shoulders, and I even wrapped it around my shoulders once when walking. On one side it has poppers that keep it in place so that you can just wear it like a cloak. It was a brilliant buy. I really like it, and I can see that I'll use that a lot when I'm back in the UK walking as well. I took with me a small bit of carry mat to sit on for breaks. I barely used it. One morning the chairs at the cafe were wet, so I did sit on it. Other than that, because we stopped mainly at cafes for our breaks, we weren't sitting on the ground and I didn't use it. Having said that, it hardly weighs anything, and when I had to sleep at Stansted Airport on the way back from Spain, it was really useful to have that as a little extra layer of comfort at the airport, so I don't resent taking that at all. A lot of my walking companions had what I would consider to be really heavy towels. I love my little travel towel. It is airlight and tiny. Just get it out of its bag. This is the medium size, I think. And it is that big. It's not good for covering your modesty. However, it's great for drying yourself. It's really absorbent, and when it's full of water, all you do is wring it out and start drying yourself again. It's a lot lighter and a lot smaller than a lot of the other towels that I saw when I was travelling, and I was perfectly happy with it, although I have to say it was a bit of a treat when we stayed in places that had fluffy towels that get you dry really properly. The other thing that I used this towel for was some nights it was really hot, so I made it wet and laid it on top of me to try to cool myself down at night, and also I would make it wet and put it around my neck during the day to keep myself cool as well. Other essential items, water bottles. My metal water bottle weighs something like 240 grams, so I bought this little trespass one before leaving. It weighs hardly anything. It's 50 centilitres of water, and it's sort of my emergency top-up water supply, and it came in very useful. My main water supply was this 2-litre bladder with all of the bits and the pipe. These are really difficult in my view to keep clean and sanitary, But if you're using them every day, then you're swilling water through them every day. It's not too bad while you're out. It's trying to dry them after you've finished using them that's the challenge, in my view. Other bits and pieces that I took with me. I love my cooler cloth. Let me just show that to you, cooler cloth. This is a pea cloth. It's slightly absorbent on this side, waterproof on this side. And one of the things that shocked me on the Camino is that there was very little litter along the path, but there was an awful lot of toilet tissue that people had left behind when they'd been for a pee or other things. This was my way of not leaving any toilet paper behind when I needed a pee on the path. I love my cooler cloth, so that's that. Along similar lines, I also carried some dog poo bags around with me, just in case I needed to do a number 2 as I was walking, and some toilet roll. And had I done a number 2, it would have been scooped up with the toilet roll into the dog poo bags and taken to the next bin. There are so many people walking this path, it's just not practical even to dig a hole for number 2s. I carry a bag of what I think of as bits and pieces. It includes things like my head torch, again quite a light head torch. I didn't really need to use it, but I'm glad I had it with me because it's possible that some of the albergues where we stayed wouldn't have been light enough to walk around and to get ready in the mornings before we set off. And a head torch could have come in handy. As it happened, we always had enough ambient light, so I didn't need to use it. Although some of the other people sleeping in the albergues clearly felt the need to use theirs and shine them in our faces sometimes. Other things to do with technology: plugs, charging leads, a battery pack. I like to carry a battery pack with me. On occasional days, we didn't manage to charge our phones overnight because there wasn't anywhere secure to leave them. So you can either leave the battery pack charging because it's a lot less valuable than a phone and less likely to be nicked, or you just carry a full battery pack with you and you can just charge from that when you need to. This I acquired on the way. It was just a ribbon, a Camino ribbon. The reason that I got that is not just to remember the route by, but if you're staying in hostels, you have to leave your walking poles by the door in most places. Everybody's walking poles look similar to each other. So what I would do is tie this around the handles of mine and my friends' walking poles so that nobody would accidentally take ours thinking that they belong to them. This, excuse the advertising, this is just a case for my glasses. I had my sunglasses with me with their own hard case, so I could swap them over, but there were going to be times, for example when I was sleeping in a hostel, that I would take my main glasses off as well, and I wanted somewhere to put them where they wouldn't get scratched. One of my friends who was walking with me forgot to take something for her glasses and ended up scratching her prescription glasses, which is quite an expensive mistake to make, so I'm glad I had that with me. I took some business cards with me, little light business cards, but I only used one of them, so I'm not sure I'd bother in the future. It's easy enough to give people your contact details on your mobile phone. Pegs. I started off with a couple of pegs, but one of them fell off, so I'm afraid I littered a peg somewhere along the path. I use these to hang clothes off my bag, but usually I like to secure things with a safety pin as well. Safety pins are really useful. You can just pin things on. I don't ever feel like they're quite strong enough on their own, so I like to peg as well, and they weigh hardly anything, so I don't mind too much carrying those. Tenacious tape. I used it to help fix some shoes for one of my friends. It didn't stay on for very long because the shoes were really dusty, but tenacious tape is brilliant for fixing all sorts of things. Oh, it was used for something else as well, I can't remember what, but worth carrying for a few grams. These are an essential item if you're staying in hostels. Earplugs. These are the silicone ones that you mould and then sort of put into your ears. Lots of snoring. Not just snoring, but people doing other inconsiderate things during the night, like yawning like bagpuss really loudly, or packing really loudly and taking a long time over it and things like that. So it's good to have earplugs if you're staying in the hostels. I also had a bag of iron supplements and multivitamins, and the reason for this is that last time I did a long distance walk, I became severely anemic by the end because you use a lot more iron when you're walking. I didn't want that to happen to me again. It's not very fun. So I took some iron tablets with me and took one every day. Tissues. My first aid kit. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. This is mainly the blister side of it. So I had quite a few blister things with me. And this is the pharmaceutical side of it. Ibuprofen, diarrhea tablets, hay fever tablets, things like that. And this is a replacement bandage. I'm not sure you can see it very well. 2 of these bandages were used on trek, one for somebody who'd hurt their ankle and one for somebody who tripped and fell and caused a bit of a gash in his knee. So it was replaced twice during the trip. I recommend taking bandages and gauze to cover wounds with. My earbuds for my iPhone. I didn't actually use them very much, but it was quite nice at the airport to be able to listen to some music. What else have I got here? I have a guidebook. I started off with just a guidebook on my phone, an e-book, and I realised that that didn't work very well because it's really difficult to flick backwards and forwards between the map and the description and the places to stay and what have you, and I found it really difficult to use on my phone. One of my walking companions had this book that he wasn't using, so I was doing a lot of the planning with another friend, so I ended up carrying the guidebook. I would actually take that weight in the future and carry a guidebook with me instead of just the e-book. I like to take a diary when I'm walking, so I had a notebook and a propelling pencil. Pencil because it works in the rain and also because they're really light. Now, what else? I had with me as well a camera as well as my phone, which I carried in my bum bag. Other things in my bum bag included my passport, of course. You never want to lose sight of that while you're away. And a few euros. This is what we tried to avoid when we were walking. Every gram counts. We were trying to avoid accumulating coins, which turned into a bit of a game as we travelled. I took a tripod with me so that I could take photos of myself if I needed to on my camera. I hardly ever used it. I'm not sure I'd bother again. Either that or I need to get better at taking photos. I also took a fan with me. When it was really hot, I did use it, but not very much. It doesn't weigh much. I might take one again. Health insurance card. Obviously travel insurance information and what have you as well. Something that you do want to take if you're walking the Camino is your credential. This is a booklet that you get. Everywhere you stop, every cafe, every hostel has a stamp, and they stamp your credential for you. When you arrive in Santiago, the cathedral looks at the stamps that you've got to make sure that you have walked far enough to get your certificate of completion or Compostela. Talking of which, one Compostela that I accumulated during my walk at the end at Santiago. There are a couple of other bits and pieces. I gained this little arrow on the way. My friend bought it for me and we both carried one the same. Very lightweight. Really nice to have something with you that is associated with the path and sort of labels you as a pilgrim. And talking of which, I have some pilgrim shells that I picked up. I acquired one of these little hands. Apparently anybody with one of these hands off the back of their rucksack will give you a hug. And then the final thing, almost final thing, that I accumulated during my visit was walking poles. I've never really got on with walking poles before, but I injured myself while I was walking, and I needed the poles to get back on the trek again. So I now have a pair of lightweight walking poles, bit of a nuisance in terms of air travel because they don't go as hand luggage, so I had to check them in with somebody else's checked luggage, one of my friends, on the way back, because I only had hand luggage booked. But they turned out to be really useful. I did like walking with them in the end, particularly on the tricky downhill bits. It was great to have a pair of poles with me, and of course when I was injured and couldn't walk without them. I accumulated a day pack on the way. It's quite heavy and quite significant. I wouldn't normally take this with me, but again, I was injured and I chose to have my heavy pack shipped forwards so that I didn't have to carry the weight when I was just getting back to walking. So I was glad to have the opportunity to buy this. If I was walking the Camino again, I wouldn't take this day pack with me. Some of my friends had really lightweight dry bags that also acted as day packs, and I would probably get one of those to use instead. And finally, I think it's the last thing, is my trusted pack. It's not an ultralight pack by any stretch of the imagination. It's an Osprey, what is it? An Osprey Cirrus 50. I didn't need all of that space, but I know this pack is comfortable. It's been with me on other long journeys. It's really comfortable. I barely noticed that I was carrying it, and it just does everything that I need. So that's my pack. I think that's everything, although I did say I'd go into a little bit more detail about my first aid kit. So let's just have a look and see what's in here. This is magic stuff. You can buy it, there's a brand called Hiker's Wool that sells it, or you can get it from crafting shops. If you do needle felting, it's needle felting wool. It is brilliant to wrap around your feet and toes and anywhere you've got a hot spot and you think you might be developing blisters. This is amazing stuff. We only found it in one shop on the whole of the Camino. One of my friends took a big bag of it with her and dished it out to people all over the place, and they all loved it. So I would highly recommend taking some of that with you if you're walking. This padding was used by some of my friends on their blisters. You basically put this over a hot spot and it takes the friction instead of your foot taking the friction. Luckily I didn't need to use it, but it was well used. Gauze pads. Just strips of plaster again for blisters. Ooh, Compedes, just in case. I didn't have to use any of these, so they've all come home with me. One of my favourite things for walking with is this. There's not a lot of it left because I gave it to so many people who had sore feet. Gel tubes, toe gel tubes. They are like a plaster on the outside and gel on the inside, and you put them over your toe. They're quite stretchy, so I can fit this one over my big toe as well. And it just stops toes from rubbing against each other, stops the friction again. Also, I have some errant toenails that grow at slightly odd angles, and when I put these on, the toenails don't get as bruised as they would otherwise. So these are brilliant. Again, I didn't need to use them for my feet, but this is the last bit that I have left because so many other people did use it while I was away. And of course, safety pins, useful for all sorts of purposes, and a bit of micro pore tape just to hold things on. Oh, there was one thing that I wanted to say. One of my friends had a penknife with him that he used quite a lot as well, which I didn't have. So that's one thing that I would recommend taking that I didn't have with me. The final thing that I didn't talk through is my wash bag. I carried some insect repellent with me that I only actually used once, but it was probably still worth carrying because there were a lot of insects around that night and I was glad not to be bitten. The reason that I took this was as a deterrent to bed bugs, but we didn't see any sign of bed bugs in any of the hostels that we stayed in on the Camino at all. Deodorant, a bar of soap. I didn't start off with a bar of soap. I started off with a small bottle of shower gel that I kept leaving behind, and eventually I left it behind permanently. So ended up with a bar of soap, which is a bit heavier than I would choose to carry. Toothbrush, tiny little toothbrush, little sun cream, face cream, a pair of nail clippers. I like to keep my nails really short when I'm walking so they don't get bruised or make holes in my socks. I forgot when I packed these nail clippers that my nail scissors are lighter and can be used instead of carrying separate scissors with me. So in the future I'll go back to just carrying a pair of nail scissors instead. Small tube of toothpaste, don't need a big tube. A sewing kit. In my experience, sewing kits don't get used very often, but this was used, so that's great, and they weigh virtually nothing. Obviously any pharmaceuticals that you need, any tablets or what have you. A little nail file. Again, if you've got nails that grow out at funny angles, you can file across the top of them and stop them from hurting you. And I think that's about it. I hope you found that useful, and I hope you have a fabulous time walking the Camino.